For many people watching developments in the Sahel, there is one question that continues to spark curiosity. If relations between Burkina Faso and many Western countries have become increasingly complicated, why does trade between the United States and Burkina Faso still exist? Why would Washington still be interested in exporting products to a country whose government has chosen a very different political and diplomatic path? Welcome back to Sahel Mum, where we go beyond the headlines to understand the deeper forces shaping Africa and the world. Today, we are exploring a question that is often surrounded by speculation but deserves a careful look. This is not a story about military alliances or political speeches alone. It is about economics, global markets, business interests, and the reality that even countries with political disagreements often continue to trade with one another. To understand why the United States still wants to export goods to Burkina Faso, we first have to understand something important about international relations. Politics and business do not always move in the same direction. History has shown countless examples where governments criticized each other publicly while companies from those same countries continued buying and selling goods across borders. Diplomatic tensions may rise, ambassadors may exchange strong statements, and governments may disagree on major global issues. Yet trade often continues because businesses, consumers, and industries depend on products that cannot easily be replaced overnight. Burkina Faso is no exception. Since Captain Ibrahim Traoré assumed leadership, the country has pursued a policy focused on strengthening national sovereignty. His administration has spoken openly about reducing dependence on traditional foreign partners, encouraging local production, and building stronger economic ties with countries that respect what the government describes as Burkina Faso's independent choices. These policies have changed the country's diplomatic landscape. However, changing diplomatic relationships does not automatically mean ending all commercial activity with every Western nation. In reality, the United States exports a wide variety of products to countries around the world, including nations with which it may have significant political differences. From machinery and agricultural equipment to medical supplies, industrial technology, software, and specialized manufacturing components, American companies participate in global supply chains that stretch across nearly every continent. For Washington, exports are more than simply shipping products overseas. Exports support American factories. They support manufacturing jobs. They create income for businesses. They contribute to economic growth. Every additional market represents another opportunity for American producers to sell their goods, recover investments, and remain competitive against manufacturers from Europe, Asia, and other regions. Burkina Faso, while not among America's largest trading partners, still represents part of a broader West African market that continues to evolve. Its population is growing. Its infrastructure needs continue to expand. Its mining sector remains active. Its agriculture remains a significant part of the national economy. All of these sectors require equipment, spare parts, industrial tools, vehicles, technology, chemicals, medical products, and many other specialized goods that are often imported from abroad. This creates commercial opportunities that businesses naturally pay attention to. But there is another reason why exports matter. Trade is often viewed as a bridge that keeps communication open even during periods of political disagreement. Governments may disagree on security policies or diplomatic strategies, but commercial relationships sometimes provide a channel through which dialogue continues. Many economists argue that countries engaged in trade are more likely to keep talking than countries with no economic relationship at all. Whether one agrees with that argument or not, it has influenced international economic policy for decades. The United States has long promoted international trade not only as an economic tool but also as an instrument of influence. When American products are widely used abroad, they often create long-term business relationships. Local companies become familiar with American technology. Engineers learn to operate American equipment. Hospitals use American medical devices. Businesses purchase replacement parts from American suppliers. Universities adopt American educational technologies. Over time, these commercial relationships can become deeply rooted. From Washington's perspective, maintaining exports helps preserve those connections. At the same time, Burkina Faso has increasingly explored partnerships with countries such as Russia, Turkey, China, and others that have expanded their economic presence across Africa. These countries are also competing to supply machinery, construction equipment, telecommunications technology, industrial systems, and consumer products. This means Burkina Faso has become part of a much larger competition, not simply between governments, but between global industries. Every major exporting nation understands that losing a market today may make it much harder to regain tomorrow. Once businesses establish relationships with new suppliers, they often remain loyal if those suppliers continue delivering quality products at competitive prices. That reality makes every export destination strategically important, regardless of its size. This is one reason analysts often say that economic influence is built gradually rather than overnight. If American exports decline while competitors strengthen their position, future opportunities may become increasingly limited. This is not unique to Burkina Faso. It is a pattern seen across many emerging economies. As countries industrialize and develop new sectors, foreign companies compete intensely to become long-term partners. Some compete on price. Others compete on technology. Others compete on financing, training, maintenance services, or infrastructure investment. For Burkina Faso, these competing offers may provide greater bargaining power, allowing the country to compare different proposals before making major purchasing decisions. From the government's perspective, having multiple potential suppliers can reduce dependence on any single country. From the perspective of exporting nations, however, remaining present in the Burkina market helps ensure they are not left behind as the country's economy continues to evolve. This becomes especially significant when considering Burkina Faso's long-term ambitions. The government has repeatedly expressed its desire to encourage industrialization, expand local manufacturing, improve agricultural productivity, modernize infrastructure, and develop energy capacity. Each of these ambitions requires equipment, expertise, and investment from various sources. The question then becomes not whether Burkina Faso will import goods, but from whom those goods will come. And that question is where global competition quietly unfolds, far away from television headlines and political speeches. While public attention often focuses on diplomatic disagreements, businesses are watching procurement contracts, investment opportunities, infrastructure projects, and emerging industries that could shape commercial relationships for years to come. Understanding this broader economic picture helps explain why exports remain important even during periods of changing geopolitical alliances. But trade is only one part of the story. There is another dimension that is even more significant, one involving strategic influence, regional competition, and the future balance of power in West Africa. That is where this discussion becomes even more interesting. The strategic competition unfolding around Burkina Faso is about far more than the sale of machinery or agricultural equipment. It is also about influence. Throughout history, major powers have recognized that trade can create long-lasting relationships. When a country regularly imports technology, vehicles, medical equipment, or industrial systems from a particular supplier, it often develops technical standards, maintenance networks, and business partnerships that can last for decades. In simple terms, today's commercial relationship can become tomorrow's strategic partnership. This is one reason why many analysts believe that no major economic power willingly abandons an emerging market unless it has no other choice. For the United States, maintaining commercial links with Burkina Faso helps preserve a presence in a region that is undergoing rapid political and economic transformation. It is worth remembering that the Sahel is not isolated from the rest of the world. The region sits between North Africa and the Gulf of Guinea. It connects trade routes, energy corridors, agricultural production, and some of Africa's most important mineral resources. What happens in Burkina Faso can have wider implications for neighboring countries such as Mali, Niger, Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, Togo, and Benin. As these countries continue to develop, international businesses naturally pay close attention. Another factor that cannot be ignored is Burkina Faso's mining industry. The country is one of Africa's leading gold producers, and gold remains one of its most valuable exports. Although the United States does not control Burkina Faso's mining sector, American companies and investors, like many others around the world, closely monitor developments in resource-rich countries. Modern mining depends on specialized equipment, heavy-duty vehicles, industrial pumps, safety systems, laboratory instruments, software, engineering services. Many of these products are manufactured by companies based in different parts of the world, including the United States. This means that even when a country seeks greater economic independence, it may still import highly specialized products that are not yet produced domestically. At the same time, Burkina Faso has repeatedly emphasized that it wants to add more value to its natural resources instead of simply exporting raw materials. Government officials have spoken about encouraging local processing, supporting domestic industries, and creating jobs within the country. If those ambitions continue to develop, demand for industrial machinery, manufacturing technology, and technical expertise could increase significantly. That creates opportunities for suppliers from many countries, not only the United States, but also China, Turkey, India, Brazil, members of the European Union, and others. In other words, the competition is open. No single country automatically secures these opportunities. Each supplier must demonstrate value, reliability, pricing, and long-term commitment. This is where Burkina Faso's bargaining position may actually become stronger. Instead of depending on one major partner, the country can compare offers from multiple countries and negotiate terms that best serve its national interests. Supporters of this approach argue that greater competition among suppliers gives African governments more leverage. Critics, however, caution that managing multiple international partnerships requires careful diplomacy and strong institutions to ensure that national priorities remain at the center of every agreement. Both perspectives continue to shape discussions among economists and policy experts. Another reason Washington may wish to maintain exports is that commercial relationships often outlast political administrations. Governments change. Policies evolve. Leaders come and go. But businesses frequently think in much longer timeframes. An American manufacturer investing in a regional distribution network today may be thinking about where the market will be 10 or even 20 years from now. Likewise, Burkina businesses making purchasing decisions today are often considering long-term maintenance, technical support, and future expansion. This longer perspective explains why companies sometimes continue doing business even when political headlines suggest growing tensions. For businesses, consistency matters. Reliability matters. Trust matters. Contracts matter. These practical considerations often receive less attention than political debates, yet they play a major role in shaping international commerce. There is also a broader lesson emerging from Burkina Faso's recent experience. The country has increasingly sought to diversify its international partnerships rather than rely heavily on any single bloc. Whether discussing security cooperation, infrastructure development, energy projects, or commercial trade, officials have frequently spoken about building relationships based on what they describe as mutual respect and shared interests. This diversification strategy reflects a wider trend seen across several African countries. Instead of choosing between East and West, many governments are attempting to engage with multiple partners simultaneously. The objective, according to supporters of this approach, is to maximize opportunities while reducing excessive dependence on any one country. From this perspective, the United States exporting to Burkina Faso is not necessarily evidence of political agreement. Rather, it reflects the reality that global trade often continues despite diplomatic differences. Economic interests, commercial demand, and long-term business planning frequently operate alongside politics rather than being entirely controlled by it. Of course, trade policies can change. Sanctions, regulatory decisions, security developments, or shifts in government policy could all affect future commercial relations. International trade is never completely predictable. It evolves with changing economic conditions, diplomatic priorities, and developments inside each country. For now, however, the broader picture suggests that Burkina Faso remains part of a competitive global marketplace where numerous countries seek opportunities to supply goods, services, and investment. The United States is one participant in that competition. China is another. Turkey is another. India, Brazil, and several European nations also continue looking for opportunities across the continent. The real question may therefore not be why one country wants to export to Burkina Faso, but how Burkina Faso intends to balance these competing interests while pursuing its own long-term development goals. And perhaps that is the most important point of all. Because in today's interconnected world, economic relationships are rarely one-sided. Every agreement involves choices. Every partnership carries opportunities as well as responsibilities. Every trade relationship reflects not only what one country wants to sell, but also what the other country chooses to buy. As Burkina Faso continues redefining its place in Africa and on the global stage, those choices will likely become even more significant in the years ahead. But there is one final question that many viewers continue to ask. Could these growing trade relationships eventually reshape the political landscape of the Sahel itself? That is exactly where we will take this discussion next. As we move deeper into this discussion, it becomes clear that the story is not simply about exports from the United States to Burkina Faso. It is about how Africa itself is changing. For decades, many African economies had relatively few choices when seeking international partners. Certain countries dominated trade, investment, and development financing, giving them considerable influence over economic decisions across the continent. Today, that landscape looks very different. New players have entered the picture. Asian economies have expanded their presence. Middle Eastern investors have increased their activities. Regional African trade is gradually growing under the African Continental Free Trade Area. And countries like Burkina Faso are increasingly seeking to make decisions based on what they believe best serves their national interests. This changing environment has created a far more competitive marketplace. For the United States, remaining engaged commercially means staying relevant in a region where influence is no longer guaranteed. It is important to understand that governments do not export products. Companies do. American businesses manufacture equipment, pharmaceuticals, agricultural technology, software, industrial machinery, and many other products. These companies constantly search for new customers around the world because expanding into international markets helps them grow their businesses. If a Burkina mining company needs specialized drilling equipment, several international manufacturers may compete for that contract. If hospitals require advanced medical equipment, suppliers from multiple countries may submit proposals. If farmers need modern irrigation systems or improved agricultural machinery, companies from different parts of the world may all seek to become preferred suppliers. Competition is therefore a normal feature of international trade. Another interesting aspect is the growing emphasis Burkina Faso has placed on food security and agricultural development. The government has repeatedly encouraged increasing domestic food production, reducing reliance on imported food where possible, and investing in modern farming techniques. Achieving these goals often requires tractors, irrigation systems, fertilizer production equipment, storage technology, and processing machinery. Some of these products can be manufactured locally over time, while others may continue to be imported until domestic industries develop the necessary capacity. This creates opportunities for international exporters, including American companies. However, there is another side to this conversation that deserves equal attention. Burkina Faso's leadership has consistently spoken about avoiding excessive dependence on foreign imports in the long run. Instead, officials have promoted industrialization, skills development, and local manufacturing. If these objectives are realized, the country may gradually begin producing more goods domestically, reducing the need for certain imports over time. Ironically, many countries that export industrial machinery actually welcome this kind of development. Why? Because as industries grow, they often require even more advanced equipment, replacement parts, software upgrades, and specialized technical services. In other words, industrial development can create new forms of trade rather than eliminate trade altogether. This explains why many advanced economies support industrial partnerships abroad instead of simply exporting finished consumer goods. Long-term commercial relationships often evolve alongside economic development. Another factor influencing American interest is the broader West African market. Burkina Faso is a member of a region containing hundreds of millions of consumers. Although each country has its own economic policies, businesses frequently look beyond national borders when making investment decisions. Establishing commercial relationships in one country can sometimes open opportunities throughout neighboring markets. This regional perspective matters because infrastructure projects, transport corridors, and cross-border trade continue to expand across West Africa. Companies that establish a reputation today may benefit from future opportunities as regional integration deepens. Of course, none of this guarantees success. Every exporter faces competition. Every contract must be negotiated. Every customer evaluates quality, cost, reliability, and after-sale support before making purchasing decisions. This is why international trade is rarely static. Markets constantly evolve. Consumer preferences change. Governments introduce new regulations. Technological innovation reshapes industries. Businesses adapt accordingly. For Burkina Faso, these changing dynamics may actually increase its negotiating power. Instead of accepting the first available offer, authorities and private businesses can compare proposals from different countries. One supplier may offer lower prices. Another may provide better financing. A third may include technology transfer or workforce training. These additional elements often become just as important as the products themselves. This competitive environment has fundamentally altered the way many African governments approach international partnerships. Rather than viewing cooperation through the lens of ideology alone, increasing attention is being given to practical outcomes. Which partnership creates jobs? Which investment strengthens local industries? Which agreement supports long-term national development? These are the kinds of questions policymakers increasingly ask before making major economic decisions. It is also worth noting that American exporters themselves operate in a highly competitive global economy. If they withdraw from promising markets, competitors from other countries are usually ready to step in. Rebuilding lost commercial relationships later can be expensive and difficult. For that reason, businesses often prefer maintaining a presence, even during periods of political uncertainty. That approach reflects a broader reality of international commerce. Trade is rarely about 1 year. It is often about the next decade. And in the case of Burkina Faso, many observers believe the country's economic direction over the next 10 years could have significant implications not only for its own citizens, but for the future of the wider Sahel region. Whether those expectations become reality remains to be seen. Much will depend on domestic reforms, regional stability, global commodity prices, investment flows, and the government's ability to transform ambitious development plans into measurable results. Yet there is one final dimension that ties all of these pieces together, a dimension that goes beyond economics and enters the realm of global strategy. It is this final piece that helps explain why Burkina Faso has become a country watched so closely by powers from every corner of the world. As we reach the final part of this discussion, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The question was never simply, why does the United States want to keep exporting to Burkina Faso? The bigger question is what Burkina Faso's changing role means for the future of Africa. In recent years, the country has become one of the most closely watched nations in the Sahel. Political reforms, security challenges, new international partnerships, and ambitious economic goals have all placed Burkina Faso at the center of global attention. Whenever a country begins redefining its foreign policy, major powers naturally pay attention. Not because every decision changes the world overnight, but because today's policy choices can shape tomorrow's economic landscape. For the United States, maintaining commercial ties with Burkina Faso allows American businesses to remain part of that evolving story. For Burkina Faso, maintaining access to a wide range of international suppliers can provide flexibility as it pursues its own development priorities. These two realities can exist at the same time. It is also important to separate government policy from private enterprise. While governments establish trade regulations and diplomatic frameworks, many export decisions are ultimately made by private companies responding to market demand. If Burkina businesses or institutions require products that American companies can competitively provide, trade may continue regardless of political rhetoric. Likewise, if another country offers better prices, financing, technology transfer, or long-term support, Burkina Faso may decide to purchase from that supplier instead. That is how international commerce works. Competition determines many outcomes. Looking ahead, Burkina Faso's greatest opportunity may not lie in choosing one global partner over another. Instead, its strength may come from maintaining the freedom to work with multiple countries while ensuring that every agreement contributes to national development. Whether the partner is from Africa, Asia, Europe, the Middle East or the Americas, the central question remains the same. Does the partnership create jobs? Does it improve infrastructure? Does it strengthen local industries? Does it transfer knowledge and skills? Does it help improve the lives of ordinary Burkina citizens? Those questions matter far more than political slogans. For the United States, continuing to export to Burkina Faso should also be viewed within the wider context of global trade. America exports to countries across every continent, including nations with very different political systems and foreign policies. Trade does not necessarily imply political agreement. More often, it reflects economic demand, business opportunities, and mutual commercial interests. The same principle applies to Burkina Faso. As the country expands its relationships with China, Turkey, Russia, India, Brazil, fellow African nations and Western economies, it gains access to a broader range of technologies, investment sources, and commercial opportunities. This diversification could reduce dependence on any single partner while increasing Burkina Faso's ability to negotiate agreements that align with its long-term goals. Whether that strategy succeeds will depend on many factors, including governance, transparency, security, education, infrastructure, and sustained economic reforms. No international partnership alone can guarantee prosperity. Ultimately, development is driven by the decisions made within a country itself. This is perhaps the most important lesson from today's discussion. The global economy is changing. Africa is changing. And Burkina Faso is part of that transformation. Countries around the world, large and small, will continue seeking opportunities to trade with Burkina Faso because they recognize the country's economic potential, strategic location, and growing importance within the Sahel. The United States is one of those countries. So are many others. The future will not be determined by which nation exports the most products. It will be determined by how effectively Burkina Faso uses every partnership to strengthen its own economy and improve the lives of its people. As always, the facts are often more complex than the headlines suggest. International relations are rarely black and white. Behind every trade agreement are businesses, workers, consumers, investors, and governments, all pursuing different objectives that sometimes overlap and sometimes compete. Understanding those realities helps us move beyond speculation and appreciate the deeper forces shaping today's world. Thank you for joining Sahel Mum for this in-depth discussion. If you found this analysis informative, consider sharing it with others who are interested in African affairs, international trade, and the future of the Sahel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary, where we continue exploring the stories behind the headlines with balance, context, and careful analysis. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and keep seeking the bigger picture.